You are listening to Curious Cat, the podcast that examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. And I'm your host, Jennifer Hote. Join me every week as I explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. This week, I am elated to have Scarlett Darkwood on the show. Like me, she's an author. In fact, we had the same publishing house until Book Trope tragically went bankrupt. And after that, after they closed their doors, we kind of, all of us, the authors, mourned together. We regrouped. Some of us got our books back out there. But many of us have remained connected through socials. And Scarlett is one of those people I'm just delighted to still have in my social spheres. So Scarlett, welcome to Curious Cat.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. So you have a really amazing background, and I just started scratching the surface. I know you're a tarot reader. You are a student of the occult. You mentioned the Rosicrucians. So I'd like you to tell people about you and what you want to lead with first.
Well, I am a certified tarot reader, and I know people will snicker at that because it's like, what's a certified tarot reader? You can go through a certification course like I did through Sal Jade's Psychic Healing Academy program, and we do it just to add some legitimacy to it. And we also are
Mm-hmm.
certified through the International Therapy for Complementary Therapists as an alternative therapist. And so I've been reading cards off and
Wow.
on informally for over 30 years and decided I wanted to get real with it and build a business with it. In 2000, let's see, no, 1999 or 2000, I
Mm-hmm.
joined the Rosicrucian Order and was in it for 10 years and then got out because just the fees were getting very high. They came back online. And so 10 years later, I rejoined and started where I left off. And the Rosicrucian Order is a philosophical order that teaches mystical traditions that have been handed to them down through the ages. And so it's a
Oh, that's
mystical approach,
fascinating.
philosophical approach. And the reason I got into more of the occult or I guess witchy side, and oddly enough, I
Mm-hmm.
don't identify as a witch, but people would say,
Yeah.
well, you do some of that witchy stuff. And I'm thinking, yeah. And I was like other people. I didn't have a good understanding of it, and I thought, "Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
bad." And Rosicrucians would probably bare their teeth and hiss too, but they usually don't try to judge people. But people have their prejudices, and I have found that it's through a lack of understanding, really, of what
Mm-hmm.
I guess the witchcraft or the paganism is all about. And you probably, when you really dig into it, will find that it is probably one of the most spiritual things that you will ever study and learn. I mean, I find myself continually pulled in a spiritual way, even though I may not act it or speak it sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
you really are connected. You're constantly aware of your power and what you can do, what you cannot do, or shouldn't do. And once I learned that, I wasn't afraid of it anymore. And there is a lot of overlap between some of that study and
Mm-hmm.
Rosicrucianism, but Rosicrucians don't teach witchcraft or anything like that. But they have
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of people in their orders. They say we have all kinds of religions in our order.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the knowledge that you've gained being part of that Rosicrucian, I want to call it a community of learners in a way, but has it influenced or do you see it resonate in your tarot readings?
Yes, because what can make this different for me is that I do have those mystical teachings. And oddly enough, people
Mm-hmm.
don't know this, but Christianity started as a mystical teachings. They don't know
Yeah.
that because
Mm-hmm.
when Constantine was emperor in
Yeah.
325 AD, he abolished anything
Mhm.
that didn't fit with the ecumenical council he chose. So you have a
Yeah.
host of other gospels out there that were mystical and very different than what's in the accepted canon. And I'm going to have to blame some of the apostles for some of that as well.
I was doing a deep dive about reincarnation and Edgar Casey, and I was astounded to find out that yeah, reincarnation was a staple of biblical teachings until Constantinople. Constantine, sorry,
Constantine.
not Constantinople, Constantine, and then it was obliterated, and it was anything that they felt like, well, if you know you can this is I had to overlay my feeling about it, but my feeling about it was that anything that took away from the church as an institution's power and gave it back to people, they obliterated. So having that feeling of we are all God, the God lives within us, they wanted to get rid of that type of teaching. I mean, there were people that were even their limbs were chopped off and they were thrown into the river because they translated the Bible from, Latin into Greek or whatever. So they didn't even want it to be accessible to people. They wanted to be middlemen. So with the Rosicrucian, is it a Rosicrucian order? And do you become part of like a chapter, or is there some sort of organizational feeling to it?
There is the Rosicrucian Order Amark, Ancient Mystical Order Rosicrucis, and you can get on their
Okay.
website, rosicrucian.org, and you can join the order. And they will take you on a very organized study from beginning
Mm-hmm.
to their end, or whatever that
Yeah.
is. I'm in the 12th level, so I'm
Oh
considered
my.
adeptus major. I think that's where I'm supposed to be an adept. I don't feel
Wow.
very adept sometimes. I struggle with being human. So yes, the
Yeah.
thing I like about it is they teach it in a very logical, orderly fashion. And you get monthly
Mhm.
monographs. You can have those downloaded too. You don't have to have them. I don't think they mail anymore. Their website's very
Yeah.
sophisticated. Lots of free information on there from their digests and
Wow.
everything. So somebody can go in there and immerse themselves before they join the order if they wanted to. If they just want a really good background. I have just
Mhm.
joined BOTA, which is BOTA, Builders of the Adytum, and that focus more on tarot and Kabbalah. And what's
Oh.
nice about that as a tarot reader, I can
Yeah.
bring that mystical approach to the major arcana.
Mhm.
I don't know that they do the minor arcana. It looks like maybe the major arcana. I could be wrong about that. I just joined this order.
Yeah.
But what's going to add to the tarot readings that I do is I can really talk to you about a little bit more about the elements of the cards and what they really mean. And there's a very mystical journey from the Fool all the way to the World.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so before you dive into that, what was your what drew you into tarot? Was it something that followed a family line, maybe, or and then second, what it was your first tarot deck? Tell us about your first tarot deck.
I don't come from a pagan witchy tarot group. I kind of wish I did,
Hmm.
not to bash my family, but
Yeah.
I mean they were true,
Hmm.
Baptist, Catholic, Christian based, ordinary
Hmm.
people that didn't delve into any of that stuff. And so I
Hmm.
never got exposed to it. And of course, I'm older. And so when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s and getting off, but you didn't have all the accessibility that you have now. You didn't have a new age shop in town. You didn't
Yeah.
get on Amazon and decide you're going to order tarot cards. You weren't going to get
Hmm.
on Hay House or Llewellyn and try to
Hmm.
order. So what was
Yeah.
weird is when I moved to Nashville, I was in my mid 20s, and there was a section of downtown where they had some really fun shops, and I go into one of them. I think it was like a recovery shop. I don't know what. It's not even there anymore. And I look in and I see
Really?
these groups of cards called tarot, and I don't know what it was. I was just attracted to them. I was scared of them, but 'cause I don't know what they
Oh,
were, but they
really?
fascinated me. The reason I picked out the deck that I did is because it had the guidebook, the cards, and a tarot cloth. There was nothing about,
Oh,
"Oh, what do
wow.
you connect with, and how does it feel to
Hmm.
you?" Well, they weren't open, you couldn't tell. To me, I wouldn't have known how to pick out a deck. What's fascinating is I
Yeah.
ended up with the Mythic Tarot by Juliet Sharman Burke, and I studied her book, and tried to learn the cards as best I could. So when I did readings and I would go years between readings, I would have to brush up a little bit.
Yeah.
Now,
I
though
bet.
I can go blank on something because you're just gonna have that
Hmm.
happen, or you'll get something confused, I can do them by heart. I can look at something and
Wow.
tell you, what they are and go pretty fast with it. Sometimes it may take me a little bit because I need to think about what I'm feeling and how I want to present it. But, that's the difference
Hmm.
between somebody brand new knowing nothing as opposed to years later getting back into it and really going through a course. And Sal Jade
Yeah.
offers a complete tarot course on Udemy. And,
Oh, wow. And so how long did it take you to complete that course?
it took me when I finally did it, it took me several weeks. It's like 6 hours, of video. I took
Yeah.
notes and everything, so it took me longer. But, what's interesting is I grabbed my cards out my very first deck, the Mythic Tarot, and I looked
Mhm.
at them and I said, "That's interesting because I'll never part with the deck because it was my first, but I don't resonate with it either." I now understand after looking at the
Ah,
Rider Waite series and the drawings
mhm.
why I had difficulty with some of the cards and their meanings.
And so have you changed the deck then that you do your
Yes,
readings with?
if I do a deck, I want something that's actually it's the Rider Waite images from Pamela Coleman Smith. And
Okay.
or any very slight variation. I don't want a big variation on that. I wanna be able because
Mhm.
I understand now why I connected better with it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's pretty amazing. And then, is there something that you have to do to get in the right mindset before a reading? And with that question, do you have to give yourself time to, after a reading, to kind of ground yourself again, or just kind of wash off that energy to get back into it? Like, is it a reading a day that you could do? Or I'm just curious about that.
Well, I'm doing shows now, and so I could get several in a
Oh,
show. So usually, in the ideal world, what you would do would be to take a moment, center yourself, and kind of call in guides and do a quick kind of a prayer. And then in between
okay.
people, you can do like an imaginary showering off or clearing or
Hmm.
knock on the deck or you're not allowed to burn anything in a show.
Mm-mm.
So, using
Yeah.
smoke or incense or anything like that's a no-no. But, just knocking on the
Yeah.
deck, I will admit, I don't always do all of that, and I seem to do fine.
Yeah.
I'm not as
Well, I
ceremonial
think
that way.
you've built up your endurance.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe you've built up your muscles, because I think that a lot of people couldn't, just being, because I go to metaphysical shows, and just as a consumer and a lover of, the people that are there, the artisans and things, to support them. But I was at a show recently, and it's a show that kind of travels around the Pacific Northwest throughout the summer, and it's the We Me show. And anyway, there was this fellow, and we saw him at the last show, and my daughter and I instinctually just went the other way. He had his booth there front and center, and I looked at my daughter. I said, "Duh." He was trying to engage with people as they came in, and and get them to touch these things that he had. And I said, "Walk away. He's a psychic vampire." And I don't even remember saying it. And my daughter, we went to an aura reading person to sign in for that. And for her birthday, I wanted to give her that. And when we sat down, Bryn goes, my daughter, because I said, she's the one that's psychic, not me. I don't have that. And then Bryn goes, you just said that guy's a psychic vampire. And the tarot reader just lost her mind. She goes, he's at every show. I see him every time. I see him. He says, be vulnerable, touch my things. And I swear he's implanting things. So there's a lot of energy at those shows. I mean, a lot.
Yes.
So I'm in awe of you to be able to sit there, and it's an endurance
Right.
race.
I What's really interesting with me is I'm very careful. I don't like being solicited from a booth. I don't do it myself, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my people are very first timers and they're passing by
I
and I
bet.
see them look and I said, "Hi, would you like a reading? You need a reading." And they're like, "Hmm, you know what? I think I do. I've never done this before." So my husband
Mm-hmm.
said it's really interesting that you tend to draw them in, and it's a little
Mm-hmm.
scary going through your first reading, because you don't know
Mm-hmm.
what to expect. I mean, I was just like I was
Yeah.
scared, but and it's like with anything with tarot, you're going to hit some, you're not going to hit some. You're going to have that one or two at every show where
Mm-hmm.
you don't know where you stand with it. I've had some people where
Yeah.
it's like I keep Kleenex on my table because it gets very emotional for them. So I pull out a tissue and we just kind of chuckle and kind of talk about it, and so it's fascinating. So I love it.
Yeah.
It's it's really nice because with everything I've learned, I can kind of pull all that thought process and all that energy together. So when somebody, is into metaphysics and they talk about rituals, they talk about things, I can relate to that. And what's interesting is the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing, the whole reason I got into it is I was writing a book, Hour of the Witch Spinners and Legacy of the Lightbringers, and I thought, wouldn't it
Mm-hmm.
be helpful if you knew something about Wicca or witches or like really new? So I joined the Witches Box. And there's a monthly subscription. And when I got in it, I was hooked. I thought there's nothing to be scared of here. Nothing, nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it just
Yeah.
all went
It's
hand
a
in hand.
Oh my gosh. And I'll have links to your Amazon, to your books, and also to your YouTube channel, because I really wanted to ask you about that as well, because you have some amazing content there that people need to check out, and including your tarot knowledge, which is extensive. But I can imagine you at one of those metaphysical shows, you have a very, like a pearly, golden white light about you, and it's very trusting presence, and it's so authentic that it would be a perfect place for somebody to go for a first tarot reading, because it's a trust exercise.
Yeah, it is. It is. Sometimes we don't know how we come across to others, but
Mm-hmm.
most every time, if I look at someone, and say, "Would you like a tarot reading?" or "Oh, come on, you need a tarot reading," they kind of think, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like, "Okay, okay, I've been wanting to do this," and it's pretty.
Mm-hmm.
What's really amazing is when you get the hits, and I have to tell one quick experience because it was a little weird. I felt a little
Please.
foolish, but it worked. So I read these two ladies. One lady had suffered a loss, and so I read her cards. And so we did that. And then she did her friend. And it's like in my mind, I knew this was a different person, different things, but I don't know what was happening. I suddenly started reading her cards as if I were reading for the other lady. When it turns out that I was done, and she said, "Well, this my friend here that you read for has this and this," and I said, "Oh goodness." I said, "I don't know what's happened." I said, "I don't know if I've lost my mind," but I said, "I think I just kind of blended the two of you." Turns out they both had lost their husbands. Um, they were good friends. The last lady I read was a funeral director. And so there's something about the
Wow.
way all of that blended that but the lady said, "Don't worry." She said, "Your reading made perfectly good sense." So
Wow.
I think for me, with any psychic ability I have, I'm not psychic like other people
Yeah.
may be, but I think mine is very subtle, but it's there. And I think it
Mm-hmm.
was just a situation of really tuning in, and they were so similar that they just blended. It was
Wow. Well, and that it's almost like they were almost like sisters in the way even their journeys had
yes,
been very parallel to one
yes.
another. And that that is psychic. And I heard somebody recently told me, said, you need to, everybody's
Yeah.
psychic, but it's just, and so, really don't compare yourself to other people. And also, I wondered if, like, you're using the cards, it is intuitive. And I think that you probably have, do you have more like a shorthand language with your favorite deck now, where it's like, you don't, you said it yourself, you can do these shows in almost like a rapid fire readings, but there's a shorthand. I don't, take yourself and your skills for granted, because I think you are very psychic. And I think just being drawn to tarot, it makes you a very intuitive person. So
Well,
I'm just calling
well,
BS.
yes, absolutely, you're right. This is someone who had no pagan witchy background with family or anything.
Hmm.
What was really fascinating, my little Southern Baptist grandmother, who I adore and who has since passed, when I did bring my deck over
Hmm.
and was reading for the family, she was totally fascinated. She would run to the table, "Okay, what is it?" And I'm thinking, "Okay, she's really not supposed to be listening to this," but it was like, "Oh, it's Mama, who cares?" And she was just fascinated with this, and I said, "Grandma," I said, "you do know that if somebody had brought this in your house when you were younger, you would have gone just ballistic." She said,
Yeah.
"I wouldn't have known what the cards were. I would have known what they were." So I keep laughing to myself thinking, she's gonna have her next life, and she may have a desire to be a tarot reader and not know where that came from.
Yeah. I- Isn't that true? That's so interesting. And that is like been half of my experience with after my father passed away. I didn't think I had baggage because I was baptized when I was a baby, I guess, because they were Catholic at the time. But we didn't have a church, regimen. We didn't go on Sundays. And in fact, my mom became church adverse because she was so all in. And then she and my father divorced. And so she was chucked out of the Catholic church. That was
Oh,
way
they
back in the
will,
day.
yes.
And so she really came to hate them, right? So I would sit on Sunday mornings and watch those, the TV evangelists and parrot that stuff. And my mom was just like, no more TV on Sundays because it just grossed her out. But so I wasn't indoctrinated, I didn't think, into that kind of Christian mindset. But then as I've gone on this spiritual journey since losing my dad, I realized how culturally, the Western culture, you are indoctrinated. It's darkness and light, it's good and evil. It's this dichotomy that is constantly being shoved down our gullets. But really, our superpower comes from the blending of the two and in the acknowledgement of the two. So I think it's cool that you like were your first impression of the tarot cards when you went in that store in Tennessee was, oh, these are interesting, and then kind of a little bit spooked, but you leaned into it. And look at what a gift it's been to you and other people.
Exactly, exactly. It's been an interesting journey and something that I haven't quite let go. And I read at a convention one time 4 hours straight. I've read for coworkers, I've read for family, read for a friend's party, and it's just like over the years. And so to say I've read regularly for 30 years is not correct, but I
Yeah.
have been exposed to these for over 30 years. I was in my 20s. I'm not in
Hmm.
my 20s anymore. So, it's just having to brush up, but really doing the course and really connecting with a good, really the Pamela Coleman Smith, she drew those images for a reason based on the structure that
Hmm.
Arthur Edward Waite gave her and them coming together. And
Wow.
she died penniless, by the way. She kind of got a bum into the deal with that. But yeah, it's putting all that together and just seeing what it can do, and it really does help people. And it's just trying to educate people to get past the fluffiness of it, or
Hmm.
the ha ha attitude, and really using
Hmm.
them as a tool. I think used to cartomancy, especially with playing cards, was fortune telling. It was for fun, it was fortune
Hmm.
telling, but as things have evolved, we see that really the tarot gives a lot of insight into your life. It's really uncanny, but
Hmm.
it's all an energetic choice. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I think a lot of people can be helped. I hope I help these people
Hmm.
at the shows. And, I've even
Hmm.
had a couple of people ask me to do spells or rituals for them. So that's
Wow.
kind of interesting, but, there's study that goes into
Hmm.
that. Um, you will learn
Hmm.
very quickly, with Boda and with the Rosicrucians too, and with paganism, that when you talk about your power, it's really your divine will. And when you look at your
Mhm.
divine will, you're looking at those images in, like, especially the magician, and looking at the high priestess, and you're looking at those black and white columns, and you're moving on as you're moving through that journey. The whole point is you have divine will, and spirit with you always, and it's always a union of opposites, because in the opposite, knowing the
Mm.
differences, there is a common ground, there is a unity to it.
Really?
So it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so there were so many little Easter eggs in that because you mentioned the magician and the high priestess, and those are two cards from the tarot
Mhm.
deck. And then people always talk about certain cards like the tower that they're terrified they'll get before a reading, and the devil card or
And
whatever.
death.
And there's yeah, death. They're stigmatized, and I just wanted you to maybe bring the listeners into those stigmatized cards and maybe educate us about them.
Those cards, I haven't gotten into Boda or even into the YouTube playlist that Boda of New Zealand does with those cards. But the thing with those cards is they're nothing to be afraid of. They, to do a death, I mean, obviously, if you were in a situation where someone was dying, that might be usually, but even when somebody dies,
Yeah.
there's going to be a change. But here's the thing, those
Mhm.
those cards signify tearing down of old ideas and old beliefs and making way for something new. That a lot of times you have to do that. The good thing about it is when you kind of clear away the old, it sets a new path and a new direction. And you can look in a new direction and go forward and do something even better, or it's a release. Sometimes we need that release,
Mhm.
and I think people don't understand what those are. The devil card, it can either signify a base or banal character personality. It really is like a card of being attached to something that's not good for you, the card of addiction. If you look at that devil, you have the man and the
Ah.
woman chained, and a lot of times that
Mhm.
man and woman, like you see in the lovers, it's your conscious and your subconscious. Subconscious is the
Oh,
woman,
wow.
conscious is the man. And we can get our conscious and subconscious chained to certain ideas and things, fears and anxieties that keep us from growing and expanding. And if you look at the lovers,
Wow.
you'll look in the Bible and it says, oh, the woman will be subject to the man. Okay, that's a bastardization of really what that
Mhm.
is all
Yeah.
about. Because if you replace those words with subconscious and conscious, you would read it as, and the
Mhm.
subconscious will be subject to the conscious, which means
Mhm.
what we give our attention
Wow.
to and what we think about and perseverate on is what we manifest.
Exactly. And that devil card just like it makes us aware of something that maybe is dwelling in our shadow that we have to face head on in order, like you were saying, to grow. So that isn't a negative thing. And I think about it in terms of since I was a little kid, I love to write down my dreams and interpret dreams. And it's the same thing when I've had, even after my father's passing, it was like a year after, and I had this series of dreams when we were in Hawaii, of all places. But one of them was like this. I was at like this Taj Mahal, but it's a small world meets Taj Mahal. It was really weird, very trippy, kind of LSD. And there was this giant elephant up ahead, and I was on this little boat, and I went beneath the elephant's legs, and I was like, "I love you, elephant, I love you." And then that was over, and then I woke up and I wrote it down. And then the next dream was I was like visiting in this house, my elbow was on something, and then I realized, oh my God, my elbow's on this coffin. So I'm like, oh my God, it must all be about my dad. And then I start doing this intuitive kind of meditation, and then paired with my little dream journal. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, you dream about what you need, not what you want. And they were both saying, get over it. You've mourned your dad. move on. It's in the past. It doesn't serve you anymore. And it's okay to just release that and move on. And then I went into a different stage of grieving for my dad. I grieve with kind of joy, crinkles in my eyes again, instead of being sad. And I know that he loves that on his side. But so I think about tarot in that way as well. It's like, the death in the cards doesn't mean death. It's a metaphorical death. And I hope more people are open to that, like those messages now. It feels like people are more open to expanding their thinking on these things.
They
Yeah.
are. I've seen people's reaction when they get those cards. They're like, "Oh no, the one I didn't want." And I'm thinking, "Not to fear, this can be actually very good." And they're like, "Oh, really? How's that?" And so you explain all of that, and I think they come away feeling a lot better that, okay, there's nothing to be afraid of here. And maybe these are some things you need to take with you or think about, maybe that will help you, move forward in your life or to make a
Hmm.
change. And I think they find that to be very helpful. I remember the one man I did.
Hmm.
It's really interesting. The men are fun to read for. I don't know why. I mean, don't I like reading for
Really?
everyone, but the men are fun because more of the readings tend to be with women, and so when you get the occasional male, it's a lot of fun. But one guy had never done it, and as we finished up and everything and he was walking away, he looked over at his partner and said, "Wow, that was really impressive." Because it was an interesting hit. It
Wow.
was it was interesting to see people's reaction.
Wow, probably. And do you think it's because they don't come with the preconceived notion and they're just like delighted in the whole experience? It's so fresh and new to them.
Probably, and when you find out how accurate it is or how close it hits, I think it really kind of, leaves people in awe. It's like, "Oh my goodness." I mean, even I still get in awe when I pull something, and it's like, "Oh, okay, that's kinda what I was thinking." It just and
Hmm.
sometimes it'll throw a surprise and what's interesting is a lot of times, if I can remember, I like to do an oracle pull, and the oracle pulls can be every bit as, enlightening, and they blend
What's
in
that?
beautifully with the tarot reading. A lot of it is just exactly what we had talked about.
What what's an oracle pull? Is it a special deck of cards
Yes,
or?
there are tons of oracles. So oracles they're cards. They come in all kinds of designs. It could be angels, it could be gnomes, it could be fairies, it can be, whatever. It's just there's tons of them. There's
Hmm.
probably as many of those or more so than tarot. As to where tarot is very structured, oracle is
Hmm.
not. It's not structured. It's very loose and free flowing as to where you've seen the memes. Tarot says, "Girl, you're about to get killed," or you're about to whatever. The oracle goes, "Oh, go and live life and be happy." Um, they're more free flowing and they're more positive and upbeat, and they're looser interpretation. That doesn't mean you can't you can't think with it or that
Yeah.
you don't think with it, but they're very enlightening.
Hmm.
I like
Do you do them at the beginning of the reading? You'll pull an oracle card at the beginning, or is it something that you do at
I
the
usually
end
do it at the
sometimes?
end. I do it at the
Oh,
end.
okay.
Yeah, if it's a bigger reading, like if somebody's doing a 45-minute reading, I might pull 3 cards,
Hmm.
at a show, it's a
Hmm.
15-20 minute read and an oracle pull, and it's really a lot of fun. I
Yeah.
love the ancestors and, yeah, the ancestors deck.
Yeah.
That's a good one. So
That Oh, that's so fascinating. I've never heard of that, and now that is really fascinating. I was gonna ask you something about the readings. Is have you ever, um because I think people self-select to, go, have a tarot reading. They kind of assume you're seeing through to their soul, so you're gonna see their uglies. So maybe people that have some issues happening that they don't really want to be out in the spoken in the open might not sit down across from you and ask for a reading. But have there been times that you've pulled cards and had some things come forward that the person is just they don't want to hear it, they didn't want to know it, they're like upset about it, not sad cathartic, but just kind of
it hit
like
too close to home.
adverse to it?
Um, I
Yeah.
have not run into that. I have not run into somebody who has said, "You know what? Stop. I'm done. I'm done." I've
Oh,
never
okay.
run into
Yeah.
that. Um,
Yeah.
I think with a tarot reader, it's very important that you be careful with what you say. And I think sometimes my
Yeah.
hesitancy can show outwardly as, oh, she doesn't know what she's saying or doing, or she's, not
Mhm.
sure of herself. That's not the case. My case is
Mhm.
I'm really looking I tend to be an overcautious person, and you have to be really careful
Mhm.
what you say to someone. And if it's something that's kind of ugly or not very good, you'd say, "So let's talk about this card here. And this card is such and such. And usually what that means is this and that and the other. And this is something you may want to look into more. Might be something that's been
Mhm.
bothering you or something." So I think it's all in the approach that might lessen that "I'm done" and run. Um,
Yeah.
a
Well, and
lot of people are
that
going
makes
through
sense.
general readings, so a lot of things aren't in depth. They say, "Oh, let's do a general reading, and we'll kind of dig deeper as we go." So, um,
Mhm.
probably we're not in positions where we're gonna pull a lot of ugly.
Yeah.
But
That sounds like it.
yeah.
Yeah. So, did you find that because you're doing the shows you were saying, but you do readings via Zoom also? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually like to build a clientele where I don't have to go to the shows, where people trust me enough to, get on Zoom. And
Nice.
the thing I like about Zoom is
Hmm.
because you can do it anytime, anywhere, provided I'm available and they're available. You can
Hmm.
do it in the comfort of your own home. I do wonder, however, if a
Hmm.
lot of people like that personal touch. And I would love to have an
Hmm.
office in the future where, as I
Hmm.
get more
Yeah.
time, maybe in the evening and obviously on the weekends, that
Hmm.
start scheduling some of that. But I think it's people getting used to the idea of why do I need this or why would I want this, and so it's like with coaching or anything else, and that's the other thing I can do too. Coaching is um, can
Yeah.
ask questions surrounding like with those cards, if you get the pool,
Hmm.
you might can ask that person, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate yourself as being adventurous and willing to take a chance? And if it's below a 5, what would it take to bring that up to, a 7 or an 8? And, have there been times you didn't take an offer? Why or why was that? You can go really into that too, especially if somebody is stuck. And I'm working on a special tarot project that kind of centers around some different things. And I'm trying to get the first one of those launched here soon.
I hope so, because what you just said gave me goosebumps because I think that that is this marriage between almost like a life coach with this guidance through the cards and your intuitive sense. Because I think in some instances, you're giving somebody permission to make a change or to stretch outside their comfort zone or to, realize, okay, this life is fleeting and what do I as a soul want to get out of it? And I do need to do up my risk taking or, maybe I'm not in a relationship that's really feeding me or whatever the thing is, you're helping them to see it. Something that they already heard in the back of their mind, probably. So I think whatever it is you're about to do is going to be a smash success. I just have goosebumps all over me, and I just can't wait to be a champion of
Oh,
it.
thank you. Well, what's interesting with coaching is it's really teaching the person to make their own decisions. That, a good coach, you don't advise
Ah,
anybody. So tarot is a great
mm-hmm,
tool because guess what? They're picking those cards based on their intuition. For them, that energy, or, if I'm doing it, for them through Zoom or whatever, but
mm-hmm,
then you go deeper than just a card meaning. It's like, okay, if you want to know about business and you pulled certain cards, let's relate those
mm-hmm,
interpretations to relationships or to business or living your
mm-hmm,
authentic life,
mm-hmm,
in any of that. And it's a real
mm-hmm.
creative venture too to look at those cards and use them in terms of more than just what they are in their base meaning.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
it's using your own power in all of this, that's the beauty of it, and you talk
Mhm.
about witchy powers, everybody has that,
Mhm.
we have our own divine will, and it's your will that will guide you and lead you through any manifestation that you,
Mhm.
have in life, you know?
Mhm. It is. Yeah, and that free will is sovereign. That's what makes us being in a meat suit so um different and interesting. I mean, I really believe in these soul consciousness, our soul contract. We came down, we've been, will be again. I'm very much I didn't even realize how into reincarnation I was until um the last 3 years, and it makes sense. Nature reduces, reuses, and recycles everything. So we're no different. But that soul contract and coming down and deciding to, you know, have this experience, but free will is above all else. So we have to say, the cards will say, maybe what I'm seeing here is this. And then you, as a free will, can say, yeah, I would like to see change in that area. Otherwise, it's not going to happen because we have to give permission to all the iterations of ourselves to make that change. Our guiding, your guardian angels, whoever it is you see as your spirit team. So I think that's a really interesting facet to tarot. Tarot, to me, like you were saying, there's the major arcana and the minor arcana. It just gets scrambled in my brain. And I'm so in awe of people that interpret the cards, even though I'm a pictorial learner. It just goes right over my head. But what you were saying, even about the details in the devil card, I want to just like look with a magnifying glass at a deck of tarot cards because every detail is on purpose
Yes,
from what I'm hearing you
that's
say.
very true.
It's almost like channeling. I wonder if they were like channeling when they created that. It's like a
They
type of
probably
channeling.
were. I mean, these occultists, these were spiritual people.
Yeah.
Um, they weren't, new to all this. They had a system, they had
Mhm.
teachings, and so I'm sure they knew how to meditate, how to, take in, channeled information. Um, you know you go back and you start looking at all the old grimoires and what was written, and you can get these
Mhm.
on Amazon now,
Mhm.
John Dee's
Yeah.
grimoires and Eliphas Levi and all of that, and they're not difficult to read necessarily. The language may be a little archaic in some places, but I kind of
Mhm.
was reading through one, and I started going, "Yep, that's what you do. Yep, that's what you do." And it was talking about, I think it was John Dee's book, I think. I can't remember. But it was talking about, yes, if you're going to do a ritual, you have to do it on the ruling day, the ruling hour, and people are like, well, what is that? And basically, you're just getting in tune with the energies of that planet, that
Mhm.
day, that hour, that everything has a meaning that way. And so that when you put a ritual, you put yourself into it. Here's the thing, Rosicrucians will say a lot of that stuff, or what Wiccans do or pagans do, is really there's no mystical basis for it because you're really petitioning your higher self anytime you go to
Mhm.
meditate or to pray or whatever it is you're doing. I think that's
Mhm.
great. I think there are times you do go within, but I think when you go outward, it reflects what you thought
Mhm.
about inwardly. In my opinion, that's kind of how I see that, and if you do call on angels or demons, and demons aren't evil, if you go through
Mhm.
certain, grimoire teachings that I have, they're not evil, they're just, they say in some dimensions that they're partners, that, the
Mhm.
angels
Yeah.
try
I
one
was
approach, demons, when it's
I
working, will
was
go for the other.
yeah.
It's
Yeah. It's kind of spooky how we're having this conversation right now, and it goes hand in hand with a lot of the content that I was taking in earlier today, preparing a future episode. And it just goes hand in hand with it. And they were saying that, actually the role of demons is so misunderstood because it's supposed to, again, it's like the devil card. It's supposed to focus your attention on the things that you have hidden or that are in the shadow, that possibly if you bring them to the light of day, just saying it out loud, maybe it doesn't have that power or sway or addictive quality to it anymore. And it just helps you to grow as a person, to capture all of yourself instead of like duct taping your half of yourself and putting it into your metaphorical basement,
Right.
your soul
Yeah,
basement.
it is very
Yeah.
misunderstood. And that's a shame because really, and Rosicrucians would think, will tell you angels are a fabrication of Christianity. I personally believe in those entities myself because I think perhaps they are reflections of ourselves. When you look at those demons and you
Mhm.
look at those angels and you look at what they do, well, if you're going to call on your higher self, can you not do that too? And so I think in my
Mhm.
mind, and I think one interview I listened to not long ago, the guest said, he said, to me, you are always going inward, even if you're going outward, because you've gone inward to really think about it and to choose deliberately and with good conscience of what you're doing. And I think a lot of that you may be calling on the higher parts of yourself, maybe not in the way the Rosicrucians would teach, but you
Mhm.
are on some level. And so sometimes when I do a ritual or a
Mhm.
prayer or a petition, I will make a note as I call on these, I call on this higher part of myself, to make a conscious. And I actually did a whole video of that on my YouTube
I
channel.
love
There's
that.
one where it says, how to do rituals. Do you use an outward entity or go inward? And um, I
Mhm.
think it was a very informative video that goes into, even though it's my opinion, but I thought I tried to present reasonings for that, that the outward, lighting
Mhm.
the candle, putting the oil, doing the herbs, bringing out your planetary, Jupiter board or your Mars board, that
Yeah.
you're really reflecting what you are wanting. It's a prayer turned outward.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely beautiful, and that balance of inward outward is really fascinating as well. Because I've been meditating and going back to my younger selves, places where I was hurt, and giving myself love in that moment, and the nurturing, the support that I needed in that moment, and then those moments don't have that same you know pain, that same association with them anymore. They no longer hurt. I felt supported and I grew through those experiences. So we're time travelers too. Like we're so much greater than we give ourselves. All of society is geared to tell us to be smaller and that we're less than, but really we're all these amazing universes in these bodies. It's
We really are.
impactful. It's
Sometimes, and I struggle with this, I'll confess. You're supposed, you hear about how great humanity is supposed to be and how really we are great beings. And, I'll mention that, on my YouTube channel when I'm trying to make a point across. But you see things going on in the world today and you're thinking, it can really challenge you to just, it's like
yeah,
sometimes I say, you know what,
yeah,
maybe spirit needs to press the delete button and let's try something else.
yeah,
But,
yeah,
I think it's the whole point of becoming, and I think we rebelled. I don't know if it was for a reason or if it was just the evil side or the darker side of
yeah.
humanity doing that. But I think they're saying that Wicca is becoming the more popular religion than ever, and that
Mhm.
people are leaving
Yep.
churches en masse. I mean, it's way
Yeah.
down, membership is in churches. Of course,
Yeah.
that's a subject of discussion, why is that happening? And I think the
Mhm.
young people are like, "We're not buying into this fire and brimstone." And they say that
Yeah.
indigo children, the millennials and these younger people,
Mhm.
they were born with a more ready knowledge of who they are and what they are, as to where the older people of us, we can learn it. It's just I think we
Mhm.
weren't born as with that ready knowledge, that ready feeling as of yet. It had to be more of a self-discovery.
I absolutely agree with that, and we all have our strengths and things. But with my kids, I have grown kids, 19 and 25, and things that I have had, just recently in the last 10 years, like come around to understand and be in awe of, and then start working on myself. They're intuitive to them, and it was funny because I did a tarot reading. For myself. I guess it was like 3.5 months ago. It was my first tarot reading, and it was interesting because she goes, "Let's get into your kids," and she dives into them, and she sees them exactly how I've always seen them. It's like, how did you give birth to these fey mage amazing people? And it's like, one of them, my older one, is she's like incredible. Her gifts are incredible. And then my younger one, even the tarot reader, she said, "Oh my God," she laughs at you and Nora, my older daughters, all of you wanting to do candles and do it in this certain way and on this certain moon, because the other one, the younger one, is just doing everything she's doing is magic. It's spell casting, and it's so intuitive. It's down to the cells of her body. She doesn't even recognize it. It's like, oh, yeah. So that's those indigo children. And I really do have such great excitement for their generation as they age, and whatever we can do to make the path easier for them. Helping other people to kind of come to understand that they aren't just helpless. They, are pretty amazing in and of themselves. That's kind of my goal, is to help people to transmute that fear into love and understand their own innate power. Has been a big thing of mine the last couple of years, that's for sure.
Well, I think they're fortunate to have you as a parent that embraces that and pushes that, because a lot of us, especially the older generation, unless you were in a family that did that, most of them didn't do that. And
No.
you were bad,
Yeah.
and you're dying, you're
Mhm.
going to hell, that little thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I guess bashing Christianity, the thing I have a problem with the Abrahamic religions is it has steeped us in fear, shame, hate,
Yeah.
darkness. And, you talk about the
Yeah.
patriarchy. There were a couple of times
Mhm.
in our history, and I did a video on that too, blending it
Oh.
with working and with societies, and then talking about how when patriarchy overtook everything, you saw a decline in society.
Mhm.
And when you had a
Yep.
balance, you didn't have that. You had prosperity, and it was, Central Middle
Yeah.
Ages and dynastic Egypt. And you had 2 times
Ah.
in history where you had a balance. And if you look at Kabbalah and you look at, all of that, and you have masculine and feminine, it's not really relating to gender per se, it's just energy. But,
No. Uh-uh.
I guess in the earth world, that is, that's reflected in male, female, more or less. It's
Mhm.
kinda, so you
Yeah.
can't really judge Kabbalah and apply it to gender necessarily, but
Mhm.
probably I'm wondering, sometimes I have my own crackpot theories, do males and females in their good sense reflect those different energies, and together you
Mhm.
have that balance if they're in harmony.
Mhm. Exactly. I just read, I think it was my deep dive on Edgar Casey. And I don't know if it was from a channeled message he received, but it was basically the masculine, feminine. If we think of the feminine as the waters of a river and the masculine as the banks of the river that kind of give just a channel, they kind of structure the outside, the path of the river so that the river goes someplace. I really loved that analogy because they don't work without each other. And I did a whole episode about, yin and yang, masculine, feminine, because the whole symbol of yin and yang, that nobody notices it, but there's the little tiny inner circle of the
In the middle.
other within the
Mhm.
one. And it would collapse upon itself if you didn't have both. And I love that we're having a shift and a more of a, hey, it is a patriarchy. This isn't balanced, but that doesn't mean burn down men and the patriarchy completely. It
Yeah.
just means come to terms, even within the masculine, feminine, within
Yes.
yourself, and acknowledge it and give it room.
Oh,
So
absolutely,
that's
absolutely.
the journey.
you hear about, toxic masculinity, or you hear about that.
Mhm.
And the thing about it is I think men need to, I guess, embrace what makes them men, that, you don't abuse your power. I mean,
Mm-mm.
women can be just as
No.
mean and
Nope.
evil, but, the whole
Yeah.
thing is, you're in from an ideal standpoint, it's both of those energies, or both of the genders, bringing the way they think, the way they are to the table, to help kind of achieve a
Mhm.
balance. And so if everyone is in balance, you won't have toxic men, or
No,
catty, mean
exactly.
women, you won't have it.
Right.
I do
Right.
believe it's nice that women can get jobs on their own and can be on, because used to, women weren't hired. And I think when
Mm-mm.
people bash
No.
feminism, I'm thinking, I know some of that issue has gone overboard and things have gotten really extreme, but a true feminism, I think, is wanting to embrace that feminine energy, not
Yeah,
bash
I think so
men
too.
either. It's
No, exactly. I think that's counterproductive. And a lot of the men, per se, are allies of the women. And so it's like, it's counterproductive.
right.
I mean, I remember it wasn't that long ago. My mother, a single mom, divorced, couldn't get credit, even though she ran the books for my father.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's, but that doesn't mean burn down the patriarchy. It
Right,
just
right.
means,
But we don't need the
just make
patriarchy
more.
like it is today. We need to pull that balance
Exact.
back and,
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
society from decaying, because they said without that balance, it just declines.
It does. Oh, that's so insightful. I encourage listeners to find your YouTube content. It's amazing. I have the links to it in the show notes. And where can they contact you, Scarlett, so that they can get a reading from you via Zoom or even in person if they're in the Tennessee area?
They can go to my website, www.scarlettdarkwood.com. If somebody would like a reading, you can go to the website, and there's an appointment button that you can click at the top of the page. There is a menu section that you can actually buy and reserve your time online. I got that set up not long ago, so I'm
Wow.
very proud of myself. And so they
Wow.
can do all
You
that
should be.
online. I'm gonna put an event page, so if they are in the Nashville area or
Ooh.
surrounding area, they can look and see where I'm going to be. My YouTube channel, yeah, just look up Scarlet. They'll look at your show notes, but, Scarlet Darkwood, just do a
Yeah.
search, and that will find it too as well. So yeah, I can be gotten. I'm not afraid for people to contact me. Do you know that I have actually had a couple of phone calls with a couple of people?
Huh? Oh, wow. Yeah, I know. I'm not afraid to use the old-fashioned phone either. I mean, some of this younger generation are,
They're
they're
phone
scared
phobic.
to make an actual phone call. I love that name. Oh, well, thank you so much for being a part of Curious Cat and taking the time to have such a rich, meaty
Oh,
conversation.
thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed it too. I hope the listeners learned something too.
Oh, I think you're an excellent natural teacher, so I'm sure they have. And I cannot wait to look up some of the books that you mentioned. I'm like, ooh, John D. Grimoire. Okay, that's a new one I'm going to be checking out after we get off the line. Thank you again, Scarlett, and I hope you'll come back to
I
Curious
will.
Cat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Curious Cat. If you like the content, stories, and information, I'd be grateful if you could like and review us on your favorite streaming service. It will help others find us as well. Huge gratitude for my art director and audio engineer. If you're in need of those services, please find their links in the show notes. Also, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious. I love you.